Well, joining us for more on the French elections and the country's economy is Dominic Thomas, chair of the French Studies Department at UCLA. Now, Dominic, the election comes amid terror concerns, immigration, stubbornly high unemployment, and concerns about France's relationship with the EU. So what are French voters most concerned about?
Right. Rachelle, we're at a major crossroads here, and the outcome of this election is going to determine the politics and economics of France for 20 years to come, as well as that of the European Union. What's so striking about this election is that 3 of the last 4 candidates that are leading in the polls do not represent major political parties. No matter what the outcome of this election is, whoever wins the presidency is going to have to wait a month or so for the parliamentary elections to see with whom they can work on coalitions. So the various platforms that they've been working on now are very much in the realm of a vision from France. And we have radically different visions that the candidates have been sharing with their electorate. In the final debate that took place just a night ago, Marine Le Pen, who's an economic nationalist, promised to deliver to her voters, or to return to them, the keys to France. In other words, control over the laws, the economy, the return of the French franc, and to try and push a referendum through on the European Union. At the complete opposite end of the spectrum, with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, we have a candidate here who has promised to address the inequalities, the rampant inequalities that exist in France through dramatic changes to the taxation system, investment in infrastructure and borrowing, and to revisit the relationship with the European Central Bank. This is going to send shockwaves through the economy as he tries to go about enacting those should he be elected. Right. And then closer to the center and on the right, you have Emmanuel Macron and Fillon that are very similar on many of these issues, to the extent that they want to loosen up taxes on the wealthy, loosen up taxes on businesses and so on. The difference mainly with Macron is that he's very much a pro-European Union person and provide tremendous stability and continuity there, particularly in the wake of Brexit and so on. And is also very interested in new areas like renewable energy and those kinds of things as well.
Now, Dominic, we know that the polls have Macron and Le Pen ahead, but obviously if Brexit and the US election taught us anything, it's that certainly nothing is set in stone. So tell us about the potential economic impact, then, the leading candidates could have on France.
Well, the thing is that whoever is elected can't ultimately do anything until we know what the parliament is going to look like. And so the only candidate of the 4 that's got any chance of making it through to the second round is François Fillon. None of the others have any kind of real representation in parliament. In the 2012 elections, Marine Le Pen had 2 representatives. Le Front de Gauche has 10, which has now essentially become the party of Mélenchon's La France Insoumise. And so it's very difficult, because nothing can ultimately happen without the vote of the parliament and with changes to the constitution. You can't just hold a referendum without the parliament weighing in on that. But if somebody is elected with a mandate from the people to enact those kinds of changes, then the momentum is going to go in that kind of direction. And it would be absolutely devastating to have another major country, and in this case one of the inner 6, one of the founding members of the European Union, to start talking about divorcing from the EU. And right now, because the outcome of this election is both unpredictable, and because no matter what the outcome is, we're going to be left with a profoundly divided France that is not designed, like the Netherlands, for example, to have coalition government, and the leaders are going to be engaged in all kinds of disputes and fights, trying to map out the economic future for France as we go forward. And the banks are going to be rattled by this, reluctant to lend money and to support these kinds of initiatives.
Now, Dominic, let's take a look at the current health of the French economy. How would you characterize it at the moment?
I would characterize it as unhealthy. Unemployment is extremely high, above 10% nationally, and much higher in poorer communities. And this is, of course, one of the major fractures, one of the major gaps in the economy that are being exploited by the far right, and I would say addressed by Jean-Luc Mélenchon on the left. This is a very divided society in which some people are doing very well and in which others are really struggling. And so the whole question as to how to to go about increasing minimum wages, providing universal health care, reducing taxes in a way that will stimulate businesses, freeing up the job market and so on, are all absolutely central issues. The big question is, how does an economy that is already so indebted, that has responsibilities vis-à-vis the European Union, going to find new ways of funding these quite ambitious programs that the candidates are offering? And that's the big question that we are left with here.
Right. And now we know that another issue is public spending. In 2016, it was 56.5% of GDP, the highest of any of the developed economies. What are the dangers if public spending isn't better managed or reined in?
Right. Well, this is really the divisions that we see between the candidates. Fillon's been incredibly aggressive with these kinds of questions, wanting to dramatically cut public spending, whereas Macron is a little bit more reluctant to go down that road. And certainly Jean-Luc Mélenchon wants to dramatically increase this. The big question with him then is, how on earth is he going to go about funding that? You can't just do it by raising taxes. So this is really the big division that you have in France. It's a system that is highly committed to providing public services, universal healthcare, and access to these kinds of things. And it's going to actually necessitate a dramatic rethinking in the mentality. And a country that's not divided could perhaps begin this conversation. But because the divisions run so deep, that conversation is going to be extremely difficult to have, because people just have very different views as to how they want to go about dealing with these questions, from either continuing to support them,
right,
or by being engaged in a bigger global economy in which supporting this kind of infrastructure is incredibly challenging.
Well, it'll certainly be a nail-biter. Thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there. Dominic Thomas, Chair of the French Studies Department at UCLA.